It is indeed a wonderful occasion when all elements, all divisions of Anatolia can come together in one room. And so as your president, I'm so pleased today to see folks from the elementary school and some kids, students from the high school, and many members of our ACT family here. It is one of the things that I believe joins and integrates us together. And on behalf of the entire Anatolia community, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome each of you this morning to this very special event. For exactly 125 years ago, on this very date, September 8th, Anatolia held its very first classes as a college in Merzifon in Asia Minor. The story behind Anatolia's founding and development is one that reflects the tumultuous historical period in which it was founded, and to a great extent, the cultural interplay between different nationalities and ethnic groups in that region. Given the challenges it has faced over the years, it is truly amazing that Anatolia still exists as such a strong and vital institution. For at many stages in its development, it could have given up and thrown in the towel, as we say. But Anatolia's resilience stems from its founding principles and ideals. And more than anything else, I hope this morning you would gain a sense from these, from the telling of this Anatolia story. So let it begin.
In the early 1800s, heeding Christ's command to go forth and teach the nations, and following the example of the apostles, a group of young American Protestant clergymen organized themselves to bring the gospel to every part of the globe. Among the regions that most attracted them were the territories of the Ottoman Empire in Asia Minor, whose Greek and Armenian populations had been among the first to adopt Christianity, but which were now part of an Islamic autocracy. The young clerics and their elders translated the Bible into the languages of the region, and many volunteered to be sent as missionaries to found churches and seminaries, to train local pastors to spread their faith in Ottoman lands. In 1865, one of these seminaries was established in Merzifon, in what is now north-central Turkey. Merzifon was an inland town of about 15,000 people, mostly Muslims, but with a significant minority Christian population of Greeks and Armenians. The Muslims wanted no part of the foreigners' religion, nor did the Sultan permit conversions, but some of the Armenians, and later some of the Greeks, were more receptive. The Armenians of Merzifon were looking for something more than the light of the gospel, however, and that was general education. Along with the seminary, a girls' school and 4 elementary schools had already been started under missionary auspices. But the Armenians wanted a college like those already begun in 2 other districts in southeastern Turkey, and like the American colleges at which the missionaries themselves had been educated. Colleges such as Williams and Oberlin, Grinnell, Carleton, Dartmouth, Bowdoin, and Princeton. The Merzifon missionaries, in turn, recognized that their seminary would stand to benefit from enrolling young men who had already received strong liberal arts training. The Armenians agreed to provide substantial funding for the startup of such a college in Merzifon, and in 1881, the founding of Anatolia College, its name derived from the Greek word for the east and the dawn, and from the name commonly applied to the interior lands of Asia Minor, was announced to the world.
We have taken the name Anatolia College rather than Merzifon College because it is too good a name to be left unused. Reverend George Herrick.
But the funds for the college didn't materialize, and the American board in Boston hadn't given its approval either. So in 1881, the missionary team in Merzifon started Harbinger High School instead, its name aptly meaning a sign of things to come. It began with 4 students and 1 teacher in a basement room. 5 years of growth later, following official approval by the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions in Boston, and from pledges of financial support from the board and the local Armenian community, Anatolia College officially began operations on September 8, 1886. Its curriculum included the study of language, science, and philosophy, and it also aimed at building Christian character. Its first students were recent graduates of the high school who continued as collegiates.
When they posed, diplomas in hand, with President Charles Tracy, himself a Williams graduate. The 5 Anatolians included 4 Armenians and 1 Greek.
The college does not exist to secure place and privilege to its graduates, but to bring forth among the people and for the people those true and self-denying leaders for which the need is so great. President Charles Tracy.
Other larger classes followed. The college years were extended to 3, and high school level classes were retained as a preparatory phase. Courses were taught in several native languages, and students also learned English and French. Anatolia College began to attract Greek boarders from the Black Sea coast, then Russians from the Caucasus, and as the school's fame grew, students came from as far away as Egypt and Persia. But the rise of Turkish nationalism put an end to Anatolia in Asia Minor. The new government in Ankara that emerged from the ashes of the Ottoman Empire forced Anatolia to leave behind its Merzifon campus in the 1920s, when the school relocated to Greece, a refugee among refugees. By agreement with the Greek government, Anatolia became a secondary school when it reopened in Thessaloniki, adding in 1981 a post-secondary division that was to become the American College of Thessaloniki, ACT, whose degrees are accredited in the U.S. according to the same standards and by the same agency that accredits many of the colleges on which Anatolia was originally modeled. The girls' school, which began even before Anatolia itself and was always closely associated with it, moved to the current campus after World War II. In 1998, Anatolia started its English language IB program, and in 2003 began instruction at the elementary level with the opening of the Anatolia Elementary School, reviving another element from the first years of American presence in Merzifon. When Anatolia had successfully reestablished itself in Greece, George White, Anatolia's second president, looked back at the school's beginnings.
September 8th, 1886. Behold a college, open with the dawn light of its first day. A college, with all its aspirations and all its needs, all the aspirations and needs of the thronging multitudes of its wide field, and little else. There was no incorporation or legal existence, no endowment or gold reserve in the treasury, no board of trustees, no building, campus, library, or equipment. But there was a college, our Anatolia College, for Dr. Tracy and his colleagues said so. President George E. White.
And today, we still say so. And for myself, I note that with 125 years behind us, in 2011, with the support of our Board of Trustees, our more than 10,000 living alumni, our faculty and staff, our students and their families, and all those who support this great and unique institution, we continue to serve as a role model in our delivery of instruction, our models of teaching, and our resource management, while also acting as a torchbearer of humanitarian values bestowed upon us by our inclusive, faith-inspired history and tradition.
Anatolia College began with few resources beyond the vision and courage and faith of its founders. Time and time again, it faced disaster. 3 times, it has moved bodily from one campus to another. 3 times, its doors have been closed by war. But from each seeming disaster, the school rose again, stronger than ever, because of the courage and devotion of trustees, teachers and students, alumni who refused to be crushed by circumstances. They never doubted the truth of the college motto that no matter how dark the night, the morning cometh. President Carl Comte.
Well, we're pleased you enjoyed that brief foray into Anatolia's history. I want to thank my colleagues David Wisner and Joe Gratali for their participation. And now to the main feature of today's program. Returning to regale us today with his wit, wisdom, and knowledge is a man who needs absolutely no introduction to this body, but I will attempt one nonetheless. He has dedicated the greater part of his professional life to the development of private education in Greece, and for a quarter of a century he served as president of this remarkable place, Anatolia College, from 1974 to 1999. And after this amazing stint here at Anatolia, he was also vice president for strategic planning at the American College of Greece in Athens, commonly known as DERE, and then he was pulled out of retirement to serve as president of the American Farm School for 4 years. But perhaps his most defining achievement has been serving as the inspiring force behind the tertiary level division of Anatolia, the American College of Thessaloniki, ACT, which offers 4-year liberal arts and business degrees that are accredited in the United States and validated here in the European Union. What a phenomenal record of service and accomplishment Bill McGrew has achieved wherever he has gone and whatever he has done. For him, it has always been about pushing for higher quality education offerings. So this morning we are very fortunate to be the beneficiaries of his wit, wisdom, and lore about Anatolia as we hear his lecture entitled Key Themes in the History of Anatolia College. So I'm so pleased that he has agreed to speak to us this morning. His explanations and descriptions will certainly help our understanding about where Anatolia has been, but also where it is going in the future. In our 125th year of educational service, it is most fitting and appropriate to have Bill McGrew bring this kind of penetrating insight to our celebration. And I truly believe that when all is said and done, we will all agree that he deserves the honorary title, Sage of Anatolia. Bill McGrew.
Thank you, President Giseke, for your exaggerated comments. It's very good to see so many old friends and colleagues, and quite a few new ones also. I wish you all a splendid beginning and a very successful school year. Since retiring from Anatolia 12 years ago, as President Gisek indicated, among other things, I've been working on a history of the college. Right now, I'm researching the 1960s, when the student body included such characters as Christos Plusios, Yannis Lalatsis. From so far as I've been able to determine up until now, not too many Cosmias. It was an honor to be asked by President Giseke to speak to you today. Alas, my talk will be similar to the one that I gave in June for visiting trustees and other guests in celebration of Anatolia's 125th anniversary. And a number of you who are present today heard that talk at the Megara Musikis. My apologies for this repetition, but please just feel free to doze off. To be sure, a brief talk cannot begin to do justice to Anatolia's history. A fabulous history spanning 3 centuries, 3 continents, 3 wars, revolutions, coups, and countless other adventures. Or do justice to the many inspired individuals who guided the college through its labyrinthine passage. One approach to providing some insights, without getting into too much detail, might be to highlight just a couple of outstanding themes. So I've selected 2 issues that seem to a larger extent to have shaped the school over the years. The first theme is institutional governance and how it evolved in Anatolia. That is, how the school was managed. And second, Anatolia's academic program and how it developed. An ambitious agenda, perhaps, but let's give it a try. So we begin with institutional governance, and we go all the way back to the very beginning, to Merzifon, Turkey. In the early 1880s. And we find Merzifon somewhere up there. There it is in big letters. It may come as a surprise to many of you to hear that the initial impetus for founding Anatolia College came not from the board in Boston. By board, of course, at that time, we mean not the trustees, they came later, but rather the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions, which was the organization responsible for virtually all American Protestant activities in the Ottoman Empire. Nor did the impetus originate even with the American missionaries stationed in Asia Minor, although they were, of course, deeply involved. But those who actually seized the initiative back in the 1880s to insist that a college be founded at Merzifon were the Armenian communities of north central Turkey. More or less that area. Their objective was to improve the lot of their people through education, to enable them to rise in Ottoman society, if possible, to change that society for the better, or if not, to gain enough education to get out of Turkey and make new lives abroad, as many of them did. And so their official body, which was called the Pondos Evangelistic Association, submitted a formal request to their American colleagues for a college to be founded at Merzifon. Now, the missionaries at Merzifon had already begun 2 decades earlier a theological seminary, together with a girls' school. They were actually replanted in Merzifon after the closing of similar schools in Constantinople, because conditions in this small provincial town, Merzifon was perhaps 15,000 population at that time, conditions seemed more favorable than in the capital for evangelistic endeavors, particularly the greater readiness of Merzifon's Armenian community to receive the Protestant missionaries. During those 20 years, the small Merzifon mission had distinguished itself by making greater progress in drawing students and winning adherents to the Protestant faith than other missionary stations. So when the local Armenian leadership petitioned the mission team to persuade the board in Boston to establish a college, the Americans in Merzifon, not wanting to disappoint their Armenian friends, eagerly embraced that project. However, serious reservations came from Boston. The board, to be sure, valued very highly its missions in Turkey. In fact, they were its most successful worldwide. But the board's priorities, especially given its limited financial means, did not normally extend to education beyond the primary level, except, of course, for training in its very few theological seminaries, one of which, as we've seen, was already at Merzifon. Those seminaries were designed to prepare young men to become pastors, who would then venture out to found new Protestant churches. That was the board's highest priority, and not to expend its scarce resources on secular education. But the handful of missionaries in Merzifon had bonded with the local people and didn't want to disappoint them. When the Armenian community, despite its extreme poverty, even pledged to contribute financially to the cost of a new college, the American team became fully convinced that this was a rare opportunity to advance the missionary cause. So the Merzifon missionaries now found themselves between a rock and a hard place. The entreaties of their Armenian comrades on the one hand, but the reluctance of the board in Boston on the other. The issue became so intense that Edward Riggs, one of the Merzifon missionaries and father of Anatolia's later president, Ernest Riggs, wrote to Boston that a dash of cold water which shall chill their enthusiasm in this laudable effort will be one of the saddest backward steps ever taken in Merzifon, and I should not wish to be responsible for the results. Riggs went on to say, pile on work onto your missionaries. Tell us each to do the work of 3 men, to struggle on with heavy burdens and to lay our bones in foreign soil. But don't tell us to withdraw from cooperation when the natives are holding out their hands ready to make great sacrifices for a noble work. Pardon my warmth, I speak from a full heart. The board in Boston could not help but be moved by such earnest appeals. It did approve Anatolia's founding in 1886 and supported it financially. One reason for the positive response from Boston was that at that very time, relations between the American missionaries and the Armenian communities in other districts of Western Turkey had become quite strained and a major problem for the board. Whereas Merzifon, by happy contrast, at that time presented a model of cooperation. This may be seen as rather ironic in the light of what happened later. In their eagerness to advance the partnership, the Merzifon missionaries readily agreed to the Armenian plan for a college, a plan which included a constitution, a governance formula that provided that the new college would come under the ultimate authority, of course, of the board in Boston, but that was a very distant place in those days. But that its actual management would be in the hands of a board of managers having equal membership by Armenians and Americans. The chair of the local board would be Armenian. After a period of 20 years, one American member would leave the board and be replaced by an Armenian, thereby creating an Armenian majority. Whereas after another 20 years, the management should become entirely Armenian. The American missionaries expressed few reservations about this governance structure. It seemed to be in accord with overall missionary strategy, which was to found churches and other institutions that should eventually come under the control of the local Protestant communities. But, as it turned out, relations between the Americans and the Armenians in Merzifon unfortunately followed the same downward spiral as at other mission stations in Turkey. Their respective ambitions turned out to be quite different, and the anticipated collaboration in managing the new college failed to materialize. Following a series of disagreements, the Armenians withdrew from Anatolia's board of managers, and its membership became entirely American. It was largely as a result of these developments, and of course these were very dramatic developments, that the Boston board in 1894 undertook to incorporate the college in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Under its new charter, full authority over the institution was entrusted to the board's Prudential Committee acting as trustees. This new arrangement clarified somewhat government issues, but still left some shortcomings. During its last 2 decades in Turkey, Anatolia's fame spread widely, and its enrollment soared, particularly with Greek students arriving from coastal centers such as Trebizond, Samsun, Erdu, Sinope, and from as far away as Russia, Persia, even from Epirus. The college, therefore, needed new resources to enlarge its campus and to modernize. President Charles Tracy normally returned to the United States to look for financial assistance from American supporters only about once every 10 years. Given transportation at that time and the duties of managing the college, he also returned to recover his health, which was unavoidable. It was no longer satisfactory to go back only once every 10 years. Anatolia basically needed an ongoing fundraising operation stateside. However, the Prudential Committee, acting as trustees, was unable to fulfill that role. First, because it acted as board of trustees not only for Anatolia, but also for several other missionary institutions. Second, because his priorities in fundraising at that time centered on religious undertakings rather than on education, which he considered to be of secondary importance. The Prudential Committee would happily manage and invest whatever financial resources accrued to the college, but will not engage in solicitation on its behalf. This meant that President Tracy was essentially left alone both to manage the college and find funds for its expansion. His options were further limited by not being permitted to approach for solicitation any of the board's supporters and contributors in the United States. Tracy protested to the board's director that the colleges connected with the board, weighted with restrictions, are so roused as to contemplate declaration of independence. The board can never hold these institutions in this way. Tracy even threatened on a couple of occasions to resign over the issue. Despite many obstacles, President Tracy made great progress in modernizing the campus until, of course, his work was interrupted by World War I in 1916. He himself retired in 1914. And his successor in 1914, George White, also argued for a separate board. And fortunately, the issue was resolved just before the college resumed operations here in Thessaloniki. In 1922, Anatolia finally acquired its own separate board of trustees, legally independent of the missionary organization. There was at least one more important phase in the formulation of the school's governance. You'll recall that from its first years in Merzifon, Anatolia's administration came under a board of managers, half American, half Armenian, and then after the Armenians withdrew, entirely American. This feature accompanied the school to Greece, where the managers were the senior American administrators. Among the responsibilities under the bylaws was to propose personnel appointments that would be finally approved by the Board of Trustees, including the appointment of the president. Back in the Merzifon days, the American board didn't much care who ran the college. They viewed it as of minor importance compared to their main goal of winning souls to their version of Christianity. But after Anatolia moved to Greece and acquired its own dedicated board, and with evangelism no longer a part of its mission, its trustees, of course, took a very direct interest in the school's administration and in personnel appointments. This became especially true when George White's tenure reached its conclusion in the early 1930s and a new president had to be found. So in accordance with the bylaws, the trustees asked the Board of Managers here in Thessaloniki to propose candidates to succeed President White. At the same time, they signaled the availability for the position of trustee Ernest Riggs, a tried and proven missionary who had also been born and raised in Merzifon. In fact, Riggs had been given to understand that he would be appointed to the position and had actually begun a year of graduate study at Harvard University to prepare for it. But to the board's surprise, the managers here in Thessaloniki replied by nominating not Riggs, but rather an educator at Robert College in Constantinople. Taken aback, the trustees replied from Boston that they doubted that person's availability and suitability and asked for another nomination with a reminder that Ernest Riggs was ready and waiting. The manager's next reply from Thessaloniki was to nominate an American working for the YMCA in Paris, with no mention of Riggs. This proved to be too much for the trustees. They proceeded not only to appoint Ernest Riggs president, but amended the bylaws so as to end the Board of Managers' exclusive right to propose candidates. That amendment proved unnecessary because President Riggs, once he reached Thessaloniki, abolished the Board of Managers altogether with the board's backing, and the top American staff who had been its members either left the college on their own or were soon dismissed. The single exception was Dean Carl Compton, who stayed and played a major role in assisting Riggs to carry out his duties, and of course later succeeded him as president. President Riggs, in close collaboration with the trustees, then introduced an entirely new administrative structure, modeled on that used by most American colleges at that time, with the president clearly in charge. Many of those features later ran afoul of Greek legal restrictions and had to be modified. One final note on governance, specifically on trusteeship. On countless occasions, I've heard it mentioned, and you may well have also, how amazing it is that individual Americans, usually with no prior connection to Greece, will accept the responsibilities of trusteeship, giving their time, their efforts, their personal wealth for the benefit of this school and its students so far away from their own country. Nothing could be truer or more admirable. Having said that, it's important to note that one of the most significant developments at Anatolia during recent decades was the appointment of Greek trustees. This began in the mid-1970s when the school was caught up in troublesome political currents following the junta years. The president needed the advice of trusted counselors who were intimately acquainted with Greek society in ways that the American trustees in Boston, however well inclined, simply could not be. The first Greeks appointed here in Greece as trustees were all alumni. Deeply honored to be assigned such responsibilities by their esteemed alma mater, they devoted immense time and energy to counseling and assisting the president, taking care, however, not to interfere with his executive responsibilities. It is in no small part due to this devoted assistance by the Greek alumni trustees that Anatolia was able to survive that troubled era. Two of the very first trustees in Greece who still serve on the board today are, I know you know them well, Stavros Konstantinidis and Angelos Bilis, who is here with us today. Okay, so much for institutional governance. Now let's go to the second subject, the second theme for today, which is how Anatolia's academic program developed. When the school came to Greece in the 1920s, this country, as you know, was in the throes of post-war stress and distress. Here in the north especially, the influx of tens of thousands of Greek and Armenian refugees dwarfed all of the other concerns. President George White and his staff considered as their first duty to provide food, housing, and schooling for homeless youth, many of them orphans from Anatolia's own Pontus region of Asia Minor. Most of them had been without education for some years. Anatolia's first efforts, therefore, on its temporary campus in Hardilao, that's where Anatolia began here in Thessaloniki, was directed to getting these wartime victims back on their feet and preparing them for employment. Before long, the college began to consider seriously its future educational options. What were the expectations of George White and his colleagues? Not surprisingly, they hoped to continue in Greece the academic program they had developed in Turkey and of which they were justifiably proud. Their model remained the higher educational curriculum offered by leading liberal arts colleges, especially exemplified by such, at that time, Midwestern institutions such as Grinnell, Oberlin, and Carleton, from which most of their faculty came. It's important to note here that the subjects that we refer to as liberal arts, including philosophy, history, literature, economics, the social sciences, went far beyond being just an instructional program. More significantly, they embodied essential ethical and humanistic values. They articulated a worldview, an approach to living and learning to which Anatolia's educators were deeply committed. So the question of Anatolia's curriculum was really the very large issue of how best to shape young lives. Here a note of explanation is necessary. George White's excellent history entitled Adventuring with Anatolia College lists the alumni from the Merzifon years. You can also find them in Anatolia's alumni directory that was published in 1986, and needs updating. These alumni went on to very impressive achievements. What is not so apparent is that this list of 300 some graduates includes only about 1/7 of the total number of Anatolia students in Turkey, and none from the separate girls' school. The other 85%, they in fact had enrolled for only a couple of years to study languages and other subjects so as to prepare themselves for employment. So only a relatively small proportion of the male students actually gained a full university-level education in Merzifon. Nor did the Ottoman government recognize Anatolia at all as a university, as nothing more than a secondary level institution. In other words, despite the school's high academic aspirations, the realities under which it operated in Turkey had required many adaptations and many compromises. Not surprisingly, something of the same proved true in Greece. Here, the national government assumed responsibility for defining the standard curriculum. It also monitored closely the operation of all schools, particularly foreign schools. These realities became fully evident a few years after Anatolia's arrival in 1924. It was in 1929 that the Greek state legislated a new secondary curriculum and standards for university admission, and in 1931 passed the law governing the operation of foreign schools. Many of its provisions remain in effect today. Until then, Anatolia had hoped to serve several objectives: to prepare young men and women for professional training in Greek universities, to enable them to begin graduate studies in America, to accommodate a variety of nationalities, to launch its graduates on careers in business and commerce. The college quickly found that these goals were not all attainable. There was little purpose in offering a full undergraduate English language curriculum if it could not be accredited under Greek law. In fact, for its first 10 years in Greece, none of Anatolia's diplomas were officially recognized. Realizing that most aspiring Greek youth desired to enter the leading professions requiring public university training, Anatolia had little choice but to modify its ambitions and accept that here in Greece it would have to offer mainly secondary education. From that point onward, it concentrated its efforts on becoming the finest high school in Greece. In 1931, it received permission to award the Apolitirion, the state-recognized secondary diploma required for university admission. In the following years, its graduates took top honors in the entrance exams for the University of Thessaloniki, which itself had just been founded in 1926. Such a compromise was unavoidable, painful though it was, given the school's ambitions to be more than just a high school. For many years, Anatolia, in fact, described itself officially as a junior college. Students in the last 2 years were designated as freshmen and sophomores. It justified this characterization on the grounds that its curriculum supplemented the Greek secondary program with English language subjects, and that Anatolia graduates applying for university entrance in the United States were commonly admitted to the junior or at least the sophomore year. In subsequent years, the Greek Ministry of Education tightened its control over all schools and allowed progressively less deviation from the standard curriculum. Anatolia, of course, complied. After all, Anatolia was a guest in Greece, a foreign school operating by government permission, and thus obliged to respect and to conform to Greek law. Moreover, there were strong aspects of Greek secondary education. They clearly surpassed the typical American high school. In recent decades, therefore, it has been the Greek faculty at Anatolia in the secondary school who have essentially sustained that school. Anatolia's basic strategy, therefore, has been to combine the finest features of Greek education with the strongest qualities of the American approach. This was achieved in part by permission from the Ministry of Education to teach additional hours of English language. Thereby, the school could offer some liberal arts subjects as English electives, particularly in the senior year. Moreover, Anatolia's physics, chemistry, and biology laboratories distinguished it among other schools, both public and private. Another resource, of course, was Anatolia's rich extracurricular offerings, always one of its greatest strengths. This amalgamation of the best aspects of Greek and American education proved to be a powerful formula and launched graduates on to successful careers in Greece and abroad. An unparalleled opportunity presented itself in the mid-1990s when the Greek Ministry of Education, under most exceptional circumstances, opened the way for schools to adopt the International Baccalaureate, an advanced curriculum taught mostly in English. Anatolia quickly seized that opportunity, and scores of students have benefited, going on to top universities abroad. Of course, the IB is restricted by law to the last 2 years of the Lyceum. Moreover, it does not prepare students for Greek university entrance, so as a result, IB participation is unavoidably limited, though still an outstanding educational medium for those who choose it. While investing its efforts unstintingly in the high school, Anatolia never abandoned its desire to once again offer higher education. With rising prosperity in the 1960s and after, a growing Greek middle class sought advanced training for its children that the public universities were slow to accommodate, particularly in fields such as the social sciences, business management, and computer science. Tens of thousands of high school graduates remained outside the universities. This growing demand for post-secondary education prompted initiatives to organize higher colleges outside the state's supervision, using a legal loophole allowing for the operation of private institutes, erga studia epiferens spudon. In the early 1980s, Anatolia seized this opportunity to return to higher education. Despite the many hurdles, the Board of Trustees approved the administration's proposal to begin a 2-year School of Business Administration and Liberal Arts. Some of you may recall the excitement of that time, the rapid growth of the new Liberal Arts and Business College, its expansion from 2 to 4 years, its winning accreditation in the United States under demanding standards, its reaching an enrollment of nearly 800 students, and the development of an entire new campus. The American College of Thessaloniki can serve today as a model for higher education in Greece by virtue of its small classes, student-centered learning methods, and faculty governance, key features of the liberal arts college conspicuously absent from the large state universities. And of course, the most recent innovation, the elementary school, which now enables Anatolia to span virtually the full educational spectrum. Anatolia's accomplishments over more than 12 decades have been truly remarkable, as seen particularly by the accomplishments of our graduates. The school's success is due, of course, mostly to a talented, devoted, and hardworking faculty and staff. My compliments to all of you, and best wishes for continuing success. Thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for any questions, Mr. President?
One or two.
One or two questions?
Any audience questions?
I didn't see any hands. Then I'll ask you a question. Who was the first teacher of Greek at Anatolia College in Merzifon? Well, who else? Valavaris. First name is not recorded.
Well, what a story. What a story it is indeed. And of course, the story's not over. We have many more chapters yet to write. And those of you sitting in the audience are the people who are going to write those chapters. And it will be so fascinating to see how this story unfolds as we move forward. But we could not let this day pass, this 125th birthday of Anatolia pass, without creating some new awards, some special recognition for Anatolians who have gone way, way beyond the call of normal duty to make this the special place that it is. And given the historical presentation that you just saw, it seemed quite logical and rational to us to name these awards after some of our prior presidents. And so we came up with the first award for leadership and service, and we named it after the first president, Charles Tracy. This award we are actually going to present today. The second award, noted in your program, is named after Carl Compton, and we're calling it the Carl Compton Award for Inspirational Teaching. And during this year, we will get together a task force, and we will develop criteria for the awarding of the Carl Compton Award in future years. So I want to make note of that now. It's a special time of recognition, and we will use this anniversary to make these awards a very important part of Anatolia each and every year. But then we return to the Charles Tracy Award. And for this award this year, our choice was very, very easy indeed. I now need to call Ms. Rhea Samara to the rostrum. Rhea, please come forward. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the very first Charles Tracy Leadership and Service Award, and it reads as follows. In commemoration of the 125th anniversary of the founding of Anatolia College on September 8th, 1886, the college has established an award to recognize these qualities: selfless leadership, distinguished service, and steadfast commitment to the college's mission and vision. So this award, named in honor of the college's first president, Charles Austin Tracy, is given on this day to Ms. Rhea Samara, class of 1972, Anatolia High School. As you all know, she served as Executive Director of Public Relations for 20 years, from 1991 to 2011, and prior to that as Executive Secretary to the President, Anatolia College, 1989-1991. So Bill, if you would stand up here on the other side of Rhea, and we will present her this award. And now Rhea gets a chance to say a few words to you all.
Mr. President, allow me to speak in Greek, but there is a translation for you, and whoever else cannot understand Greek, there is a translation, so whoever wants can read it. Η στιγμή του αποχαιρετισμού και του αποχωρισμού δεν είναι ποτέ εύκολη. είναι πάντοτε φορτισμένη με πολλά ανάμεικτα συναισθήματα. Στη συγκεκριμένη περίπτωση η στιγμή αυτή είναι ακόμα πιο δύσκολη, διότι αποχωρίζομαι το αγαπημένο μου σχολείο και όλους εσάς τους συναδέλφους. Μαζί σας έζησα το μεγαλύτερο μέρος της ζωής μου, 22 χρόνια. Πρωί, μεσημέρι, απογεύματα και πολλά βράδια. Μοιράστηκα μαζί σας αμέτρητες χαρές, προκλήσεις, πολλές επιτυχίες και γιατί να μην το πούμε, αστοχίες και ενίοτε αποτυχίες. Αποχωρώ με την ικανοποίηση ότι έχω συνεισφέρει κι εγώ μαζί με όλους εσάς στην εκπλήρωση των στόχων και των σκοπών του σχολείου. Η συνεργασία μου με πολλούς από εσάς ήταν επικοδομητική, γόνιμη και εξαιρετικά καλή. Δουλέψαμε κάτω από συνθήκες μεγάλου στρες για να προλάβουμε προθεσμίες, όμως ανταμοιφθήκαμε από τα αποτελέσματα. Και βέβαια αυτό είναι που μετράει στο τέλος. Θέλω να ευχαριστήσω θερμότατα τους εφόρους, στο πρόσωπό τους είναι ο κύριος Μπίλης εκπρόσωπος σήμερα, καθώς και όλους τους 3 προέδρους που έχω δουλέψει μαζί τους, με τους οποίους συνεργάστηκα στενά και μου εμπιστεύτηκαν στο πρόσωπό μου ένα τόσο νευραλγικό και απαιτητικό γραφείο. Dr. McGrew, you were my mentor and a great friend. Mr. Jackson, who is not here, he is in the States, he was a great leader in public relations. Dr. Giesecke, thank you for all your support and all your trust. Θέλω να ευχαριστήσω επίσης τους αντιπροέδρους για την άριστη συνεργασία τους τα τελευταία χρόνια. Με τους διευθυντές και τους καθηγητές, όλους εσάς που συνεργάστηκα, πιστέψτε με, έχω τις καλύτερες εντυπώσεις για τον επαγγελματισμό τους, την συναδελφικότητα, την ανθρωπιά και το πλεόνασμα ψυχής και χρόνου που διέθεσαν για να επιτύχουμε μαζί ένα εξαιρετικό αποτέλεσμα. Όλοι οι συνάδελφοι στο διοικητικό προσωπικό με αγκάλιασαν με αγάπη και ζεστασιά. Μου έδειξαν εμπιστοσύνη και ο καθένας με τον τρόπο του συμπαραστάθηκε στο Γραφείο Δημοσίων Σχέσεων, ώστε να ανταποκριθεί στις απαιτητικές και πολύπλευρες υποχρεώσεις του. Παρόλο που δεν υπήρξα μέλος του Σωματείου, δεν με ξεχώρισαν και πολλές φορές μου πρόσφεραν λύσεις σε δύσκολες στιγμές. Για τους συναδέλφους μου στο εργατοτεχνικό προσωπικό δεν έχω λόγια για να τους ευχαριστήσω για τις πολλές ώρες δουλειές που έβαλαν για να επιτύχουμε το επιθυμητό αποτέλεσμα στις εκδηλώσεις του σχολείου. Με μεγάλη υπομονή και αγώνιστα ανταποκρίνονταν ακόμα και αν τα σχέδια άλλαζαν τελευταία στιγμή. Πιστέψτε με, για το Γραφείο Δημοσίων Σχέσεων δεν θα μπορούσε να λειτουργήσει χωρίς τη δική τους υποστήριξη. Εδώ θα μου επιτρέψετε να κάνω μια μικρή εξαίρεση για να ευχαριστήσω ιδιαίτερος τις πολύ στενές μου συνεργάτες. Έτη Κωνσταντινίδου, Γεωργία Τσιούρη, Ιφηγένεια Σουγαράκη, Παυλίνα Χαρισιάδου, Λένα Κατσαρίκα, Αθηνά Ρουσίδου, Ελίνα Πετρίδου, Αθηνά Βεζακιάδου και Μαρίνα Χαριτοπούλου. Ζήσαμε και μεγαλώσαμε μαζί. Με συγχωρείτε, πριν λίγο συγκίνηση. Ήμασταν μαζί. Ήμασταν μαζί περισσότερο και από τις οικογένειές μας. Μοιραστήκαμε χαρές, γέλια, δυσκολίες, λύπες, άγχες και επιτυχίες. Αυτές οι στιγμές είναι βαθιά χαραγμένες στη ζωή και στη μνήμη μου. Θα τις πάρω μαζί μου σαν ανεκτήμητο θησαυρό. Ήταν η κάθε μία τους ξεχωριστή και ανεκτήμητη συνεργάτες και φίλοι. Δεν θα σας κουράσω. Θα ευχηθώ σε όλους και όλες να αγαπάτε το Ανατόλια όσο τα αγάπησα εγώ. Πάρτε τη σκητάλη από εμάς τους παλιούς και συνεχίστε με τον ίδιο ζήλο, υπομονή και επιμονή να ανταπεξέλθετε στις δυσκολίες των καιρών. Και πιστέψτε με, το πλοίο που ονομάζεται Ανατόλια θα περάσει από τις συμπληγάδες της ελληνικής και παγκόσμιας οικονομικής κρίσης, όπως το έχει κάνει και στο παρελθόν αλόβητο. Τολμήστε να κάνετε αυτό που εσείς πιστεύετε σωστό και μην διστάστε. Ενωμένοι θα ξεπεράσετε όλες τις δυσκολίες και νέες προκλήσεις θα εμφανιστούν. Μέσα από τις δυσκολίες, νέες ευκαιρίες θα ξεπροβάλλουν. Εκμεταλλευτείτε τις με σύνεση και τόλμη. Σας ευχαριστώ και καλή χρονιά.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, just a few more words and we will adjourn to the reception out in front of Morley House. As I was reflecting on today's program, there were three words that came to me which I see as long-term attributes of Anatolia College. And these attributes are resilience, innovation, and biculturalism. And if we can continue to advance these three attributes as we move forward, we all have great confidence that Anatolia will continue to thrive and prosper and make an enormous difference in the lives of our students from kindergarten all the way through MBA. And so let's adjourn this program, but with a note. I note that there is a construction hole right in front of Morley House. And so my warning to you is don't fall into it. And perhaps this is a little allegory for Anatolia. Despite our greatness, we always have a hole to fill. So that's our adjourning note.